over to the filmmakers, and we've got about 10 minutes, so don't sit there silent.
Thanks. Nina and Lucian Williams. So, are there any questions?
Yeah, first of all, fantastic job. That was really wonderfully done and entertaining. I was wondering, since there was such a dialogue about the police, to your knowledge, was there ever any effort to organize with police? Was there ever any like talking to the police unions or trying? Because in the moment of a protest and when things are being broken up, you can't expect the police officer to join forces with protesters. But maybe there's other organizing.
I'm not I'm not aware of. The question was were there any attempts that we know of Occupy to coordinate with the police in any way or try to work with them with a union or something like that? I'm not aware of any efforts like that. I do know that the police are not really allowed to do things like that. We actually tried to contact the police just to get some commentary from them, and they weren't allowed to, and they also weren't allowed to, even their spokespeople wouldn't talk to us, but they're also not allowed to interact when they're, when they're out working, like at a protest like that. And there were a lot of attempts. I do know that some of the occupiers would try to engage them when they were out policing these occupations and events and marches, and they're not able to do that. They're like not, at least in New York. This may not be the case everywhere. I'm not sure about that.
I mean, they talked a little bit when we didn't have cameras.
Yeah, everyone's.
But when the cameras are on, they wouldn't, and I definitely don't think there was any coordination. You were one of the ones who tried to contact the police.
Yeah, I don't know any effort like that really. I mean, there was, like you were sort of saying, people in Occupy tried to talk to the cops on the street all the time and sort of make some sort of class sort of reach out, but it was never a hand extended back as far as I could really tell.
There was actually, we do know of one thing, which is that Ray Lewis, the retired police captain from Philadelphia, he received a letter from his union saying that they were going to impose sanctions because he was showing up in his uniform at the protests, and that they were going to go after his pension. And so, not so much, I think.
Was there any idea of doing an analysis of the last election as it relates to Occupy?
Well, I mean, yeah, there was. Go ahead.
Sorry, do you mean the presidential?
The outcome of it or the actual election?
2012 election.
Okay.
You mean the outcome or the election?
Yeah, no, the process. But the
I'm not repeating that.
Had something different.
Well, so our time frame was very strict from the get-go. We were going to do a 1 year, and it was, we wanted to. I mean, that was actually slightly outside of our year. We just wanted to, sort of resolve that story point in a way, and so no, that was just sort of a little bit outside of the scope of what we were doing. But it's certainly interesting.
I think that, I mean, I can't measure this, but I honestly, I do think they had an impact on the election, which is why we put it in, basically. So, any other questions?
Yeah, I lived on Pearl Street during the protest, which was actually very interesting, especially turning just 18. And actually, walking back and forth from school, got a chance to talk to a lot of people. And with this film, did you ever maybe even consider showing credible professionals that believed the opposite of what you portrayed? So professors.
What do you mean believe the opposite? Like
provided a different perspective.
believe that corporations were not allowed to donate as much money they wanted to
Well,
campaigns.
there's people in Wall Street defending their point, because don't you kind of think like knowledge is power? and therefore-
Yeah, I mean, that was actually part of my portfolio, and the most people I tried to contact did not contact me back or wouldn't have anything to do with me for the project. There were 2 or 3 people who wanted to participate, who were then told by legal or PR or something that was not gonna fly. So I spent a lot of time and a lot of phone calls trying to do what you're talking about, and was sadly not terribly successful at it.
But most of what we heard from them though was like, these occupiers don't understand economics.
Yeah, I mean.
And it's just not really the point.
I mean, we did actually interview Greg David, who works for Crane's Business, or used to, I'm sorry, he was the editor for, I think, 23 years, and who's now professor at CUNY. But we ended up deciding not to use that because it almost came off as parody. It was almost like he was so condescending that you just couldn't take what he was saying seriously. And I mean, most of what he was saying was, oh, they just don't understand economics.
Which is true.
Which may be true for some of them, but certainly isn't the point. You know, that they're not economists by and large. So it didn't bring anything else new to the conversation. You know, it was just a sort of dismissive tone. It made him look bad more than anything else. And so if that's all we were going to do with it, then it didn't seem worth doing. It just was one of those decisions we made that it wasn't serving the story. You know, it was only going to make the person interviewed sort of not look great. And this isn't a hatchet for anybody. And it didn't add much, or it didn't add anything.
Okay, we only have a couple minutes, so just one more question.
Oh, sorry.
We'll do you both.
You've done a superb job chronicling the beginnings of this movement here, and so you should be commended. Now,
Did everybody hear that?
Want me to repeat that? But the second question is, then now what? So you created this awareness, or the awareness was created, you chronicled the awareness, and to effect change. What now? What do you have ideas in terms of, okay, well, what are the next steps?
So when we started this film, the idea was that we were going to bring context and comprehensibility to something something for which the media portrayals that were coming out were, they were confusing. They were lacking in context. We were seeing YouTube clips of marches and signs and people saying things on all different topics, and then there was the media coverage at that time, which was in the very first days when we started the film. There was almost no media coverage. In fact, the only media coverage that I saw before I started the film on October 1st, 2011, was coverage of yoga and sock puppets in the park. And I myself should have been more media savvy and should have questioned that. But, you know, I was busy with my life. I was working. I was doing things. I was working on another project. And it wasn't until the Brooklyn Bridge March, where all those people were arrested, that I kind of like looked up and said, wait a minute. This is not sock puppets and yoga in the park. There's something going on here. So a lot of it for me when I started it was just, you know, the sort of lie that was being told made me very uncomfortable. And it was both a lie of what was being told and also just a lie of omission. And I just, I live in Brooklyn. So when that happened, it was just, where were the helicopters? Flying, where was the news coverage? There was nothing on the news. And that just made me so deeply uncomfortable that was the day that Aaron and I went down to Zuccotti Park for the first time and filmed. Not because we were going to make a movie, but because we thought it needed to be documented. We thought this was significant and should be covered in some way, honestly. And what we found there was so unlike what we had seen in the news coverage that it was actually going there and witnessing firsthand people standing up and talking about the various issues that they were dealing with, and just the sense that of all of these people from so many walks of life who'd gone to New York, standing up and telling their stories, and just the sense coming through that the system was just broken for these people. And I wasn't okay with that just being ignored. And it's true that student effort became a service, like almost immediately afterward. But even then, I still thought that there was history being told in a really inappropriate, let's say, way. And I just wasn't okay with it. So that was why we decided to do the film. Okay.
I will answer your question.
No one else even heard the question.
The question is, where do we see it going from here? Of course, we don't know.
I was answering it though, but okay, go ahead.
We're not affiliated with the movement. None of us are occupiers. We're filmmakers, and it was our goal to make an objective and clear account that showed how it started, what it was about, why they were there, and also to give you a feel of what it was actually like to be in that park, which I don't think any mainstream news outlets, if you watch them, would give you any of that.
I just what I was saying though. So what I was getting to was that the point for us was not about what comes next in terms of, from an activist point of view, but it was to establish a firm factual basis so that whatever does come next is in the proper context. So it's just one of those things where to move forward, you have to understand where you've come from, to move forward in a truthful or honest way. So.
Okay, just one more.
Well, I can't because we gotta clean and get ready for my next one.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you all for coming.